Okay, ladies and gentlemen, I'm very honored to open this webinar today. My name is Brigit Staatsen from the Dutch National Institute of Public Health and the Environment, and I will try to chair this webinar today. This is a special occasion. It's the launch of an e-magazine that has been prepared by the Netherlands on behalf of the PEP, and also actually on behalf of you, and to be used by you. And I'm sure some people who are present in the audience also contributed to this e-magazine, because it was really a joint effort. The magazine is available in English and Russian. It's available as of today also on the PEP website, and we'll join the links to the documents later during this webinar with you. The program is as follows. We have two welcome notes. Then we have a keynote speech by Francesca Racioppi from WHO. We have a keynote speakers from one of the authors of the e-magazine, Miriam, and I'm very relieved to see that she's managed to join the room despite some technical hiccups. So that's the program. Some household keeping notes for you. I don't know if you've joined one of these webinars before, but on the right side of your screen, you see chat, polls, and translation. Sometimes we will ask a question to you by poll. If you have questions to us, you can use the Q&As if it's technical questions. If you have more general chat questions, just use the chat. And we also have translations. So we have Russian translation available for you. Mario, also French and German. I'm not sure about that.
French only. French, English.
French.
Yeah.
French, English, and Russian. So if you want to follow this in another language, go to the translation button and choose the language you want to have. So without further ado, I would like to continue. I would like to give the floor to Mario Fruianu from the Ministry of Infrastructure and Water Management in the Netherlands to provide us with a short kickoff speech. Mario, the floor is yours.
Yes. Thank you, Brigit. Warm on behalf of the Netherlands Ministry of Infrastructure and Water Management, the Netherlands National Institute for Public Health and Environment, and on behalf of the members of the Bureau of the PEP program. For me, working on international cooperation means making the effort to understand the world of your foreign. This takes time, learning, and patience. But in the end, there is friendship, results, and probably change. I recall the very lively discussions we had on the future of the PEP here in The Hague 3 years ago. In the preparations of the 5th high-level meeting of the PEP program in Vienna, the Netherlands made a strong pledge with in mind the difficult that many member states face to reach the Paris Agreement and the Sustainable Development Goals. We have shared our feeling that it would be a good momentum to bring the PEP on the next level and to align with the aim to accelerate the transformation of the sector. So Austria and the Bureau choose the title Building Forward Better, transforming to new, clean, safe, healthy and inclusive mobility and transport. It became a pathway for the Vienna Declaration. But having a pathway is one, going all in the same direction is another. For more than 20 years now, the strength of the PEP program is about integrated policy making. Integrated policy making is about making an effort to understand one another. And that's not an easy task if you want to have fruit between different professional backgrounds, researchers, policymakers, politicians, practitioners, between professionals from a wide range of different disciplines, transport, health, environment, economics, urban planning, and between the rich variety languages from London to Moscow, from Oslo to Rome. To work then effectively within the context At the same time, in a world overloaded with information, opinions, and fact-free politics, it is a challenge in itself. So fruitful cooperation begins with a search for a common ground. So the idea evolved to draft a common point of reference for future policies, strategies, action, and to try to break silos. The idea was also to have a fresh approach that could facilitate debate, but also not to pretend to have all the answers. We have tried to stay in a world between research and policies, so we took a journalistic approach, an eMagazine that would try to address the apparently simple question: how clean and environmental friendly is our transport today? So a warm welcome to this side event on the launch of this eMagazine.
Thank you, Mario, for this welcome note. Then I would like to proceed with the next speaker for the welcome. This is René van der End. He is head of the Department of Sustainability, Environment and Health at the National Institute for Public Health and the Environment. René, the floor is yours. I hope your mic is working. Please go ahead. You have to unmute your microphone. So although you push on the button for the microphone, there's still no sound. Oh, I'm so sorry. Yeah, are you good in sign language, René, or not? Is it all right that because of the time, I will say a little bit what you're planning to say? Oh, one more try. No, I'm sorry. Okay, René, I will tell a little bit what you want to say, and maybe later on during the session you will have an opportunity. I'm very sorry for this. Yeah, okay. So I think what René wanted to say, I'm going to do this by head, is that as our institute, the National Institute for Public Environment, Public Health and the Environment, we have a long history in working at a sustainable, healthy living environment, and transport, of course, is an important issue within that. We also are very heavily involved in all the COVID advices and measured monitoring and vaccination programs. We also just recently published the public health forecasting, where we looked at the impacts of Corona, but also at the impacts of Corona on the living environment and also on transport trends. We, as an institute, we are very happy to be involved in this, in the publication of this document, because it is an integrated overview, and that's very important, especially when you're looking at complex issues as transport and impacts like climate change. So without further ado, I would like to keep it to that. Welcome on behalf of the National Institute for Public Health and the Environment. And I hope that René, maybe you will join, maybe you can give us your reflections at the end of the webinar. And I would like to proceed with, do we have a poll question already? Because I also am very interested to see who is in the floor, who is in the room. So a question to the audience, because I'm not able to see you. I see that we are with about 30 people. But if you would like to answer the first question, that would be very nice for us to know where you're from. In the meantime, I would like to welcome Francesca Racioppi from WHO to the floor. Yes, I can. Hello, Francesca. Yes, luckily
Hello.
you're down there. So Francesca, she is head of the Center of Environmental Health in Bonn for the WHO, and she's also very heavily involved for years in the PEP process. And she was one of the persons that we interviewed because we started the eMagazine with reflections from 3 people who have been very active in the PEP process, and we asked for their reflections on the process and the further steps to make. And I think Francesca will also tell us a little bit more about that. So Francesca, please start, and I will try to start your presentation. But you can start your talk already.
Okay, thank you very much. I hope you can see and hear me well. And it is a great pleasure to be with you this morning. And it is a privilege actually to do that because, you know, I feel very humbled and at the same time fortunate because I've been in a very fortunate position to follow this process since its infancy, since its inception. And as Mario said in his opening remarks, within the PEP, we never really tried to pretend that we had an answer to all the questions. Actually, we have been creating ourselves some of the new questions that we have tried to address. And we have been building this process through a wonderful partnership across sectors, across member states, across language barriers, over nearly a quarter of a century, if we go back to 1997, when actually for the first time, transport and environment ministers came together in Vienna. So I'm sharing with you a few reflections on this journey from a public health perspective, because I come from the WHO side, so the health prong of the PEP. So this is how I'm trying to shape this talk this morning. Can I please have the next slide? And then the next. So, transport, health and environment has been part of the policy discourse, of the scientific discourse for the past 25 years. Here I've summarized some of the milestones. I started getting involved in 1997 when WHO was starting to prepare for a ministerial conference, the London conference, which took place in 1999. And that is when, as a WHO, we brought together for the first time not only the ministries of transport and environment, but we added the health dimension to it. And then after that, it was a kind of a journey that we made together with the UNECE and the member states to bring everything under the same roof. Can you move to the next one? And over time, our understanding of the issues has been changing very significantly, slowly but steadily. We started in the mid of the 90s with recognized, we were mapping what the issues were. We knew it was a matter of injuries, of pollution, of noise, and climate change. That was the main new thing coming up. But we were still looking at these issues in a way in isolation. And one of the examples of the consequences of failing to see the integration, for example, has been the significant issue coming out from the promotion over several years and in several member states of diesel engines. Diesel engines, they seem to be a very smart way of reducing carbon emissions. So it was thought, okay, this is a good solution to contribute or to reduce emissions from the transport sector to greenhouse gas. But then the fact that those decisions, those recommendations had been taken without a full understanding of the far-reaching consequences of these issues have created the problems on the health front, because of course emissions from diesel engines, as we know now, are carcinogens. So an evolution from that, the next slide please, came when we, in the early 2000s, and the PEP has been instrumental in reframing the discourse in this direction, we understood that these issues, in fact, they were all connected. And because they were all connected, the answer is not in a sectoral kind of approach, but the answer has to be a comprehensive one, because there are rebound and feedback effects that happen. And the other thing that was central to this evolution was the understanding of physical and the addition of physical inactivity to the public health menu. We started, and that was a gate opener, because we started looking at active mobility with an interest from a public health perspective, because it is a huge, importantly way of providing people with the health promoting and a powerful tool to reduce the risks of non-communicable diseases. Can we go to the next slide? But then we have kept evolving even more. And we have kept evolving in terms of understanding of how the systems relate. And the most recent way of thinking is that transport and mobility is central to the nexus that connects also housing and urban planning. There is not, it is a coin with the three facets, if you wish, and you cannot really treat transport and mobility in isolation from land use and housing issues. And I believe that the experiences we have made collectively over the COVID pandemic has been unveiling the importance of this connectedness. For example, as people started having a need to move much closer within their neighborhood, because they were not commuting any longer, because many of them were working from home. So they felt a need to meet their daily needs within a space that can be accessed on foot and by bike, for example. Can we move to the next one, please? And I will not break the embargo and I will leave to the next presenter the honor and the thrill of unveiling the figures. But this is where this publication is sitting. And it has been an extraordinary journey of the PEP to come to this point. I see that this publication is going to have a very long shelf life, and it is so timely and so important in the way it is framing the issues, exactly reflecting the most advanced way of thinking of the connections, the complex connections that bring this all together. And it helps us to prepare for the next phase of the PEP implementation in the years to come. So many thanks to the Netherlands for leading this effort on behalf of the PEP and making this available to our partnership. The next slide. And then, you know, this way of working of the PEP has been so distinctive. I was part of the discussions when the member states were saying, okay, shall we develop, what shall we do with this process? And there was a clear orientation to say, no, we want this process to be action-oriented. We want this process to support the change. And in fact, if you give me the next slide, this is what the PEP has done and what the PEP is supposed to do. I will just remember here and remind all of us that, for example, within the PEP, we have, and through a mandate that was given to us in Amsterdam, you see, we have a long history of Dutch connection to the process. But we got a mandate to help member states to develop policies that would bring and integrate these three sectors together. The next one, please. And when in 2008, we were struck by the global financial crisis, the PEP was very innovative. We didn't have much of the answers at that time, but collectively, we had an intuition that active mobility, sustainable mobility can also be part of a healthy economic recovery. The next slide. You will remember that we launched some pioneering studies where for the first time there was a quantitative attempt to demonstrate that, for example, promoting and achieving significant levels of cycling across all of Europe could generate new jobs. So the PEP has been exploring new dimension of the transport, health and environment connection. And of course, we have made more progress, and new reports have been launched today on this occasion. Our colleagues in the UNECE have been brought forward this work, but this was a pioneering work that was spearheaded by the PEP. The next one, please. And we have also been trying to link and to demonstrate how the PEP can help achieving so many of the sustainable development goals. So we need the transport and mobility policies to be not only recognized as a contributor to SDG 11, which is the one related to urban environments, but in fact it has a far-reaching consequences and importance for so many of the SDGs. And then one of our, the next slide, please, one of our babies, the HEAT, the Health Economic Assessment Tool. Again, the PEP has been the enabler of a very pioneering piece of work that has helped us for the first time, not only to quantify the health effects of promoting cycling and walking, but also to attach an economic dimension to that. And this has been instrumental to engage more in a more effective way with the transport and urban planners across Europe. And some of you might have been with us the day before yesterday on a side event there. And as what you have seen is that a constant effort we have made has been to make the information available in the languages spoken by the member states. So the emphasis on translating into Russian, and I'm so happy that Vadim is here today because he has been instrumental to bring also the new facts and figures into Russian language, has been part of the commitment of the PEP to be inclusive and to reach out throughout the region, beyond language barriers. Can I get the next slide, please? And then again, together with the PEP, we have been able to be at the forefront during the COVID crisis and to yet add an additional dimension to this when we have recognized that the active and sustainable mobility is part and parcel of building more resilient societies. And this has been a very timely capacity that the PEP has had to reflect on this and to bring this point now also to the agenda of the Vienna Declaration. So many thanks to the member states who came together, who revised the ministerial declaration, and who supported this work. The next slide, please. And we are now also, we have together with the PEP, there are guidelines that have been developed that my colleague Francesco Dionori, I'm sure there is another side event following this, so I will not expand on this, but I will just remind us that supporting healthy transport and mobility in the context of COVID has been one of the recent pillars of the partnership in which we have engaged. The next one, please. So now we are all looking forward to welcome and to adopt the European Master Plan for Cycling Promotion. Again, this is going to be a very powerful tool for the member states because there is still a lot of work that we need to do in the region, beginning with making cycling an equal mode of transport. That it is not just a sports or a leisure activity, but it is a fully recognized and then monitored, quantified, developing the appropriate statistics so that we know in which direction we are moving. And it is, I believe, with this ambition that I am going to the next slide and to say how we want to see the shift happening. We want to reverse the pyramid. We want, through the PEP, support a more balanced distribution of the modal shares, placing people at the center of transport and mobility and giving the space back to them so that they can be healthier, happier and live in a cleaner environment. And the PEP is part of this, of making this shift happening. The next slide. This is the end of it. I hope that I'm closing with an image which is uplifting, forward-looking, and setting us in the right direction. And I'm so happy to be together with you once again and look forward to continue working together. Many thanks.
Thank you, Francesca, for an inspiring presentation, but also a good overview of the history and everything what has been done and is going to be done. So thank you for that. I'm looking at the chat to see whether we have questions from the audience. I see that Dieter wants to join the moderation panel, but does it mean that you have a question, Dieter, to us? Well, I'll let you join the panel for a minute. So okay, but I don't see you. So I'm also looking at for a minute and at the poll to see some results yet, but yeah. So here we have a couple of questions for you, and we kindly ask you if you have time while listening to the next presentation to answer these poll questions, and we come back to it later in the discussion. Yes, and I already see from the first question the answer that we have a lot of people from urban planning and from the environment, which is nice. Also, oh, yeah, okay. I think looking at the time, I will introduce the next speaker to you, and that's Miriam Gerlofs from the Dutch National Institute of Public Health and Environment, and she has been the coordinator of producing this eMagazine, and she will give us some insights in the highlights of this magazine. So Miriam, the floor is yours. Go ahead. And in the middle of her presentation, we will stop for a minute. We'll see whether you have any questions and see whether we can have a little bit of a discussion. Miriam, please go ahead.
Yes, thank you, Brigit, and also thank you, Francesca, for your kind words. The PEP going to this eMagazine, it has been an intensive and interesting journey to describe the knowledge on the different themes that we are facing to move together sustainable transport and mobility. We would like to thank all of you who participated in this journey. Today we are showing the main findings of the facts and figures in our attempt to answer the question that Mario already has mentioned and which is on the brochure: how healthy and environmentally friendly is our transport today? As described in which you see here, the attractive eMagazine, which is available on the PEP website, both in English and Russian. Next slide. As mentioned during the, this time not by René, but mentioned by Mario and also by Brigit, we hope that this knowledge will be a joint point of reference on transport, health and environment with clear arguments to open the discussion to move together and further transforming the sector towards zero emission, health, promoting mobility and safe and efficient transport in the decade to come. Next slide, please. Before I show the main findings of the different themes, just something on transport in general. Transport is about moving people and goods in the most effective and efficient way. Transport is not a purpose in itself. Accessibility and tackling congestion are the main challenging for many transport professionals. Regulatory and policy frameworks are guiding vehicle emissions and use of space and safety. Nowadays, there is a growing support for multimodality and safe and attractive spaces for walking and cycling. Mobility is an essential part of modern society, and there will be a growing demand for mobility as more people and goods move across town, across the globe. If we look at the projected growth of the transport sector by 2030, annual passenger traffic will exceed 80 trillion passengers kilometers, and it's a 50% increase compared to 2015. The global freight volumes have grown by 70% in 2030 compared to 2015, and by 2050, an additional 1.2 billion cars will be on the road, which is a double of today's total. The current transport system and mobility patterns remain unsustainable, with growing impact on the environment and human health. Nowadays, the approach is often to provide multimodal accessibility and to limit the negative impacts of car mobility by facilitating high-quality alternatives to mobility by car. However, motorized vehicles continue to play a significant role in transport. The car is still dominant, and all too often, no multimodal mobility option is provided. Next slide. The challenges related to traffic, air pollution, greenhouse gas emission, noise, physical inactivity, and traffic accidents significantly contribute to the disease burden in the WHO and UNECE European region, with disproportionate burden in certain geographic areas and among less affluent groups of society. Cars and roads take up a lot of the public space in cities. For example, a car occupies 2.5 times more space than a cyclist does, 5 times more than a pedestrian, and 10 times more than a user of public transport at peak hours. Next slide. In the eMagazine, after a general introduction of the transport sector, 5 different topics are addressed, following each time the same structure for each topic, namely the sections, what do we know, impacts, what are we facing, and a perspective on solution. The first topic discussed is air pollution. Next slide. Emissions of the main air pollutants have declined in recent decades, resulting in generally improved air quality. However, a large proportion of the European urban population remains exposed to levels of air pollution that exceed WHO air quality guidelines. For the whole of the WHO European region, WHO estimates that 509,000 premature deaths per year are attributable to ambient air pollution measured as in 2016. Air pollution is a major cause of premature deaths and disease and is the single largest environmental health risk in Europe. Road transport leads to both exhaust and non-exhaust, like brake, tire, and road wear emissions of air pollutants. Focusing on the contribution of different modes of transport to the emissions of different air pollutants, it is shown that non-exhaust emissions contribute to more than 60% to PM emissions of road transport. Therefore, policies to address transport-related air pollution should focus not only on limiting exhaust emissions, but also on reducing non-exhaust emissions. Next slide. Greenhouse gas emissions, the next topic in the eMagazine, contribute to climate change. Next slide. Between 1919 and 2018, greenhouse gas emissions from road transport increased in most countries. In particular, in the EU, they increased by 20%. Between 2030 and 2070, transport was the fast-growing source of greenhouse gas emissions in the EU. While greenhouse gas emissions declined in most sectors in the EU in these years, emissions from transport increased. Road transport is responsible for about a quarter of energy-related greenhouse gas emissions, thus contributing to climate change and global temperature rise. Next slide. Moving to the topic traffic noise, health impact assessments show that traffic noise is a major environmental concern in the UNECE and WHO European region. Yet, we are a long way from effective policies. National limits on noise are well above the WHO recommendations, and data on traffic noise is incomplete, and the number of people exposed to high levels of noise remains alarmingly high. Next slide. Oh, sorry, no, one back. Studies by the EEA covering 33 countries show that at least 20% of the population live in areas where traffic noise exposures are harmful to health. In urban areas of most of the countries, over 50% of the inhabitants are exposed to harmful levels of road traffic noise of 50 dB or higher. Exposure to road traffic noise over 50 dB during the night is affecting about 15% of the total inhabitants. Traffic noise affects people's health and well-being. It is a risk factor for annoyance, sleep disturbance, and cardiovascular disease. Some people are more vulnerable, others are highly exposed, and some people are both. Next slide. Regular physical activity is a well-established protective factor against developing coronary heart disease, stroke, diabetes, breast and colon cancer, depression, and dementia. Next slide. The car is the most used mode of transport on a typical day, and more active lifestyle will have huge benefits. Car dependency, restricted use of public space, and lack of safety for cyclists and pedestrians contribute to physical inactivity and to a sedentary lifestyle, which increases the risk of non-communicable diseases and obesity. Physical inactivity is estimated to cause about 1 million deaths each year in the WHO European region alone. Replacement of short car trips by cycling and walking has very important health benefits. Next slide. The final topic that is discussed in more depth in the eMagazine is road safety. Next slide. Road traffic injuries are a leading cause of death and disability in the UNECE and WHO European region. More than 110,000 people are killed every year, 1 person every 5 minutes, and millions more seriously injured. Road trauma has its greatest impact on young people, being the #1 cause of death for those aged 5 to 29 years. And if I'm correct, then the next one will be that we switch shortly for the poll. So I give the word back to Brigit.
Yes, thank you, Miriam. I've also been looking at the results of the first questions. And I can note that the audience is not very favorable about the current situation of our transport systems, the rate for how healthy is it and how environment-friendly is it are very low, but also the rate for how efficient actually is our transport. So there's still a lot of work to be done in the next coming years. And if I look at which topics you think are most important, then I see that air quality and greenhouse gas emissions, but also physical inactivity, are considered to be important topics to provide attention to. And if I look at the most added value, this question, where do we see the most added value for international cooperation? Then actually I see that you like all the answers. So we need to do joint scientific and policy research, but also the joint policy messaging, whether it's binding or non-binding declarations, is considered to be very important by you, and also the joint exchange of practical solutions. So I think these are exactly the 3 things that we are already working on, and we should continue working on it. So thank you for your votes on that. And we also have some new questions already for you, but I don't know whether we can see them already. I'm looking at my screen for myself. If not, we will show them to you later. Okay, and I'm also looking to see whether you have questions in the chat. Yeah, I see Giselle Lang. You have a question about sedentary lifestyles and overweight. That is indeed also addressed in the eMagazine, and of course, actually the message is that the way we have our transport now and the way we favor motorized transport is also contributing to our sedentary lifestyles. So it's interconnected, I think. And if you already have an overweight problem, it's even getting more important to combine physical activity and, of course, a good diet to address this problem. So I hope with this answer I've addressed. Do you have the figures? Giselle asks. I have to see, because I think we have some figures in the eMagazine, but not everything. Because what we did with the eMagazine was to look at what's the contribution of transport in relation to physical activity. So we didn't make a complete picture about the state of overweight and sedentary lifestyle in Europe at the moment. But WHO has a lot of information on that, so maybe Francesca can help us with that later. With that, I would like to give the floor again to Miriam to do the final part of your presentation. Please, Miriam, the floor is yours.
Yes, thank you. And it is important to look at the context and the drivers that could make a difference in the transformation. Next slide. Inequalities is one of the factors that can explain the variety in road transport challenges across the UNECE and WHO European region. Inequalities related to transport and urban sprawl can be found in exposure levels and negative health impacts from air pollution, noise, and road safety hazards. Furthermore, the benefits from transport are also unequally distributed. Not all socioeconomic groups have equal access to healthy transportation, public transport networks, and recreational or green areas. Next slide. The external cost of road transport are not reflected in the current market prices. The total bill for traffic congestion, pollution, and accidents, for example, has been estimated at 502 billion euros per year for the EU member states alone, and are not included in the market prices. The benefits of a shift towards more active mobility and public transport arise mainly from increased life expectancy, increased productivity, and lower healthcare costs related to non-communicable diseases. This shows a strong case for investing in and promoting walking and cycling in cities and beyond. Next slide. Important drivers for the ongoing growth in motorized transport include economic factors. For example, work patterns increase in distribution of goods by the roads, but also urbanization, distance to work and services, social factors, geographical conditions like the climate, hilly or mountainous areas, distance between the cities, demographics, availability of safe, accessible, and affordable public transport, and cultural norms and individual preferences. The countries differ in those economic and socio-cultural circumstances, population density, local climate, geography, and topography, and these differences need to be taken into account when developing tailor-made approaches and solutions to the challenges posed by transport at regional, national, and local levels. Next slide. The perspectives given here are a few key approaches, strategic concepts, and trends for the transformation of the sector to inspire those who would like to work on the alternatives. We see changes in mobility management approaches, other transport options in cities, last mile options, for example, and an increasing attention on cycling and walking related to new approaches for urban development. If we look at the avoid shift approach, to avoid is about reducing the length and the number of trips and making it easier to travel, like working from home. To shift is to move towards environmentally friendly modes of transport, which is about walking, cycling, or public transport. And finally, the improve is about occupation rate, about vehicle and energy efficiency, and about data sources on travel information. If we look at the first and the last mile concept, making a transport system efficient means bringing together people or goods as early as possible in their journey. For example, e-vehicles that transport goods from hubs at outskirts city to inner city. And if we talk about the 50-minute city, everyone is able to meet most, if not all, of their needs with a short walk or bike ride from their home. This helps to reduce unnecessary travel across cities, provides more public space, inject life into local high streets, strengthens the sense of community, promotes health and well-being. Next slide. To allow for effective monitoring of the impacts of transport, harmonized data on transport, environment, and health is crucial. Gathering and describing the facts and figures in this eMagazine, it became clear that there are significant gaps in data availability and quality, which need to be filled for a better understanding and comparison of data between countries. But we know enough at the moment to act now. Next slide. It also became clear that transforming the transport and mobility sector requires a multidisciplinary approach. Collaboration of decision makers and experts in transport, environment, health, spatial planning, and economy is crucial when designing transport-related policies that deliver benefits to environment, health, and climate simultaneously. International, cross-sectoral, and multi-level countries, regions, and cities, cooperation is needed to drive the change to sustainable, environmental friendly, and healthy transport. We hope that the information in the eMagazine, the discussion we have today, and future discussion on this topic will support you all in moving together and further transforming the transport and mobility sector towards zero emission, health promoting mobility, and safe and efficient transport in the decades to come. While the share of public transport is under pressure due to the COVID-19 pandemic, there are promising new developments, like the introduction in electric vehicles, new digital services, and an increase in cycling and walking for short trips, favoring multimodal mobility. We are looking forward to work on this together. For now, I would like to thank you for your attention.
Yes, thank you, Miriam, for this presentation. And we have some time for questions and also for the poll. So first, I would like to react to the earlier question of Giselle about more data on sedentary behavior, and Francesca already answered in the chat that we don't have this data in a standardized way. And that was also something that Miriam just addressed in her presentation. Actually, we had a lot of difficulties in making this magazine, in getting the right data for the whole of the region. So that's really something that we need to work further on. And as Francesca said, watch this space as progress is being made. And then we have a question from Veronica Bayer about 15-minute cities. What about the rural areas? And yeah, here you have a very important remark, because it's I think it is different. Well, physical activity, of course, there is as important as in cities. But you see that the patterns there are differently. And I'm reminded by what Robert Thaler said in the reflection part of the eMagazine, where he compared the mobility patterns in Vienna and outside Vienna. And you see that within Vienna, it's indeed a really multimodal model, a lot of walking and cycling. And of course, Vienna has a very good public transport system. But if you go farther away in Austria, car transport is still the most important mode, which is understandable if you have no alternative. So yes, it is a different aspect, but for small cities in rural areas, of course, it's also important to have this 15 minutes approach. It could help. So we would like to. Yeah, and I see that Giselle already reacts with better connection with public transport system and development of fast e-bikes. And yeah, I fully support that. We're working in, for example, the Netherlands, working very hard on this highway for fast e-bikes. Although I must say that sometimes I get very scared when I'm cycling and suddenly this fast e-bike is coming up in my back. But we have to do something on road safety actually for the fast e-bikes, but that's also work that's being done. We have a first question. Actually, we're now here in the roundtable part of the webinar, so we would like to hear more from you, your reactions to what we presented, to the eMagazine, but also want to know more from what will help you in your work. Will the eMagazine help you? What do you need to know more? So the first question is, what's the most essential information, the most essential topic you want to know more about in order to do your work better? And Dieter said already, health, safety, and place to move, short trips and walking strategies. Yeah, I fully agree with that. I don't know if maybe Francesca or other members of the panel or Mario want to react to that. Reduce parking places in cities. Yeah, that's an important thing. We also have some figures about it in the eMagazine. The enormous amount of space that cars take up in cities, and if you could replace this by walking and cycling and public transport, you suddenly have a lot of more space in your city. But Nicholas is saying, but we need to back this up by enforcement. Nicholas, if you have any examples for this, we're very curious to hear. I mean, in Amsterdam, we do it by simply making the prices so high for parking spaces that people. Yes, Mario, exactly. Do you want to react to that?
I want to say the same thing here in The Hague. At this moment, there is a big discussion in the municipality. The tax to €10 for 1 hour, and the idea is actually not to reduce parking places, but to lower the pressure on the living areas around the beach. And there is a big struggle now between, on the one hand, the entrepreneurs who say we want to have tourists, we want to have as much as visitors as possible, and on the other hand, the people who live around the beach and say we don't want to have this traffic anymore. There is good public transport, but you see that many people still keep on deciding to come to the beach by their car, often with families, and with families it's not that easy to travel to beach. So there are all kind of practical reasons that come in the way then at that moment, if you want to raise a price or to reduce the parking places.
Okay, but I see that Nicholas, in Geneva, the fines are for illegal parking are so low that it's cheaper to get a fine. So Geneva needs to do something about that too. I think the fines have to be raised there.
Maybe they have more space.
Yeah, that's sometimes you have interesting side effects of certain measures. Yeah. Okay, and then we have a next question for you, for the audience. Well, you heard very quickly the topics that have been covered in the eMagazine. Is there something that's still missing? Something that, maybe for a next integrated overview, you want to have that incorporated? For example, Giselle already said from misinformation about obesity and sedentary lifestyles. Maybe that's something for next issue. So if you have any ideas, any suggestions, what you want to know more about.
Maybe it is still a little bit early because it launched today, but this is also an open invitation to people who want to react on the magazine, because feedback is very important, because it's not a magazine that closes a discussion, but it wants to open the.
Yes, thank you. And I see that Vadim is still reacting to the parking fees discussion. So in Moscow, the parking fees are very high. So maybe Geneva can learn from Moscow in this aspect. I think. And Dieter has some hints for indeed a very interesting conference that will take place later this year about walking strategies. And yeah, and we need. It's interesting that you say we need more information on the transformation part. And I must admit that with this eMagazine, we said we want to make an overview of the state of the art. Where are we now? And we did give some hints at perspectives, at things that could be done. But these kind of elements were less emphasized in eMagazine. Yeah, so it's very interesting to hear.
Yeah,
and what Claudia said. Yeah, I'm sorry.
Yeah, Nicholas, I see a question related to the availability of data and that we need that. But who is the one in Europe that should gather this data on the complete region? Is this the ITF? Is this the UNECE? Is this the WHO Europe? Do we have to make a program? Okay, I see the PEP, WHO Europe, selected countries. Yeah, that's what we have done so far. We did selected countries, but it also makes it very difficult, of course, to compare data. And so sometimes we really are busy to see, how do you say it, to come up with a figure, but we are actually extrapolating and therefore a little bit guessing or projecting what kind of data you want. Statistics national responsibility. Yes, of course it is. But if we want to work together in countries, we need, of course, also to see where we can align data. But maybe it's also a good question to raise next week in the Conference of Ministers in one of the sessions to see how other ministers look at this issue.
And I think also important with the data, what we notice is that all the different countries monitor, for example, air pollution, to take that as an example, differently. So it's quite difficult to compare. So if you want to collect data from different countries and have a general view on how we're doing, then it means that you have to collect data in a similar way.
Yeah.
I know that Francesca wants to say something, exactly. Because some people are suggesting it's the task of WHO Europe. Francesca, what's your opinion?
No, thank you. Well, the issue with the statistics and monitoring is that it is an incredibly complex set of, an incredibly complex undertaking. What I remember is that, for example, there are agreements between some of the big collectors of statistics on transport. And I remember of a memorandum of understanding or a policy agreement that involves, for example, example, Eurostat, the UNECE, and the OECD on coming to a shared terminology when it comes, for example, to road traffic injuries. And even when you have these kind of international agreements among the institutions that are in charge of collecting data, it is very difficult for all the member states to agree on a core set of indicators that they're going to monitor. So to me, one of the major outcomes of the high-level meeting next week would be if there is really a strong new initiative at the international level to improve the collection of data on walking and cycling. Because it may seem very strange to some of the member states who have had the tradition in collecting this data. But the reality is, at the moment, not even for the European Union, we are able to have standardized data on cycling and walking. And until we will not have this, it will be also very difficult, for example, to set baselines and targets. And as you may, many of you have been engaged in the negotiation of the master plan on cycling. When we said we wanted to set the targets for 2030, there was a big discussion, okay, but what is our baseline? And then we said, okay, the baseline is at 2020, but then the issue is how are we going to know what the baseline is across the different countries? So it's, I really hope that the high-level meeting will be a turnaround point in terms of the political commitment to invest into this. And this is just one of the dimensions that we are exploring here. There is, of course, much more when it comes to physical activities, sedentary behaviors, and so on. So it's, yeah. And I see that Francesco is adding to this point on the interagency secretariat. Exactly. And so this is one of the big areas for further development, I believe. And let's hope that once again, the PEP is at the forefront of advocating and pushing the agenda forward.
Yeah, and you think then that this data is really from the right quality? Because being busy with this project, we have dived into so many databases, also from the UNECE, also of ITF and Eurostat, and we found often that the quality of the data itself can be improved. So is there also a way to improve the existing data? I can respond if you share me, yeah?
Hello, sorry, I was waiting to be connected.
Yeah, perfect.
Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
Background. I think what you said is it's a very pertinent question. I mean, what we do with our interagency secretariat is really seek to facilitate and to facilitate the gathering of the data that we can get. But for the moment, as I said, it's national statistics. So it's very much based on, for example, total kilometers traveled by road, or passenger kilometers by rail, inland waterways, etc. This is something that's really the national statistics. It's much less likely that we have more detailed data at a regional level, and of course covering things like cycling and other active mobility modes, let's say. Having said that, we are working in the working party number 6 on transport statistics, on how to modernize the gathering of statistics. And in fact, in our meeting in a couple of weeks, we're looking very much at how to really be more responsive to data gathering. As you know, many of these transport statistics historically have been, and you've seen because you've done all the research, we publish something this year or something comes out in, where are we, in May of 2021, related, and it's data actually for the end of 2018 or maybe 2019, because it takes time to gather the data. So one of the big innovations we're working on is really to try and be more responsive, because there's no point us now in 2021 showing data for 2019, given everything that's happened over the past year. So there is a modernization process aimed at making it firstly more responsive, but also secondly looking at the full picture of transport. So also looking at gathering of more detailed public transport information, which is often difficult to find out at a national level. So there's lots of work to be done. We are working on this between our three agencies through the working party that I mentioned, but also the equivalent working party at ITF and Eurostat, bringing this together to do it in a coordinated manner and a harmonized manner so that it gives us more data, but more importantly is also less of a burden to individual countries to develop and provide this information. I hope that helps.
Thank you. And I hope that you also include more real things, because sometimes it's a bit strange that commercial enterprises with mobile telephones have data before the official statistics have, and if there is then a gap of 2 years, it's sometimes very difficult to make policies nowadays.
If I may, Mario, come back in, I think you're absolutely right with that. The problem we have is that obviously the data that's gathered at a national level is publicly available data, while the data that mobile phone companies have, which is excellent, it's real time, it's private data. So often it's privately available rather than also being privately protected data. For example, many companies, mobile phone companies, actually charge for this data, and they will not give it out for free, while the data that's gathered nationally is something that's available. And of course, there are still lots of questions around the privacy aspects of that data, how disaggregated it is, how anonymous it really is. And again, this is one of the areas that we're exploring in the working party. In 2 weeks' time, we will have a special session looking at this responsiveness of data. So I hope if you're able to attend, Mario, it would be great to see you there.
Okay, thank you. Send me the invitation and I'll be something. So are there any other questions? So Brigit, do you want to say something?
Yes, yeah, I see there's already a last question, but I also see we have only 5 minutes left. So you can think about this last question if you like, but also I got a message from René from the end, because he's still not, his microphone is simply not working. It's not working together with Hopin. I'm very sorry for that. So he just sent me his reflection, and I'm going to translate it very quickly in English. So this is actually René speaking. It's not me. I have another hat. I have the department hat now. So what he says from data and knowledge provide insights, which we need to work on improvements. But he thinks the eMagazine is an important step towards shared insights. And we would like to hear more about your reactions. I mean, this webinar is one, but we also will have the eMagazine will also be launched next week at session 3 on May the 18th. So the session of between 10 and 11. So there's also an opportunity via the chat to share your insights, but also you can, I think you can email us. So maybe Loes can add the email addresses of Mario and RIVM, but also the links to the documents, so we can continue this discussion in another way. René is also saying there are a lot of countries, there are a lot of similarities between countries, but also a lot of differences, and we can learn from each other. And that's exactly the basic idea behind the PEP. But it's also interesting to see from where are the quick wins. So that's actually what we meant by the last question. What opportunities and solutions do you see for your countries? But what are the things that we can do very easily and in a cheap way? And I think that's something that we can have a further discussion on. And unfortunately, not anymore during this webinar. So, and René is also saying the challenge is bigger than the lesson. So we need this multidisciplinary approach. Everybody who is listening, everybody who has been contributing to this eMagazine and to the PEP, well, spread the word. You are the ambassadors to work on a more sustainable and healthy and environmentally friendly transport. We can all do that together. And then finally, his last remark was the aspect of behavior. We touched upon that within the magazine in the last chapter, but how can we make our transport, our public spaces so attractive that people are really inclined to take the bicycle, to go walking, and to take public transport. And for this, we have a very important one with the COVID pandemics. We see that the use of public transport is still very low. Yesterday, the Dutch government said okay, yeah, you are asked to use the public transport again. But if the pandemic is still not over and you're not very much inclined to join a very busy commuter train, so there's also important work to do. And we have already some reactions. I see Giselle already. Car driving must become unattractive and active mobility must be attractive. I think that's a good suggestion. And with the remarks from René, I would like to ask if Mario, do you have a final reflection, a takeaway message? And when you have 1 minute, I see. And then
I have 1 minute, and I want to use this one last minute. 1 year ago, I took up the assignment to draft this brochure together with you, Brigit, Miriam, Loes, Yonne, and 50 other people who have contributed actively to this magazine. So I think that we did a great job. It can never end, this kind of magazines, because there are always new ideas, visions, researchers to take on board. But it's important that there is a good and strong connection between research and policies. Policy gets better, research gets better, and in the end, the planet gets better. And that's why we do these things. The 4 people from RIVM, I will give them soon a small token of appreciation from the Dutch Ministry of Environment, simply because it was a hell of a job. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. And to the audience, of course, this webinar is being recorded. We will save all your chats and we make a short summary of your reactions, and maybe we'll come back to you because you provided us with interesting new information. Thank you for your attention. Please go to the next webinar. I think Francesca is leading that. It will also be very interesting. So thank you very much. Enjoy the other webinars, and please join us again next week for the high-level meeting. Bye-bye. Enjoy your day.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Thank you.